And we're live, everybody. Welcome to the Business Mix Presents Any Other Business. How you doing? Rachel.
Christine.
How are you?
I'm all right, thank you very much. Had a good day, a productive day, lots of Zooming, lots of collaborating, but it's been a good day.
Fantastic. And we have a lovely guest on our show today.
We do. We welcome back in a different format, but we are happy to welcome back Jemma Fairclough-Haynes, who is the founder of Orchard Employment Law. Thank you for joining us, Jemma.
It's a pleasure. It's nice to be back, even though it is a different format, but it's nice to be back.
It is, isn't it? I know, right? Just in case anyone tuning in for the first time, not sure what are you watching. So the Business Mix is a weekly radio show that goes out on Colourful Radio every single Wednesday at 9 a.m. However, in this current time we're in, we're only able to show our play our reruns on air currently. So we thought, what could we do to keep in touch with people? So we have brought to you Any Other Business. So like when you're having a meeting and at the end everyone's like, has anyone got any other business? We're like, yep, we have. We want to connect with all of you who have perhaps started something new or changed the way that you work because of lockdown, because of COVID, because of quarantining. We want to be able to use this as a time to reflect. Last week we had remind me, Chris. I forgot. Eat Africa cuisine.
And Akusia from Eat African. Oh, have we?
Yep, Eat African. And they were telling us how they had adapted. So they do supper clubs, and so what they've done is done their clients to their diners, and then they all get together on Zoom and eat the courses at the same time and have discussion and games. So it's just about how do we adapt, how do we change. And Jemma, I'm pretty certain, you specialise in HR, employment law, that I can imagine it's been quite I don't even know what I would say. Not necessarily exciting, but definitely a lot of things have happened, a lot of changes as well, perhaps in the work that you do or the way that you perhaps interacted with your clients. Give us a little rundown on that.
Yeah, so not only for our clients, for ourselves, I was just saying to Chrissy before the show that we have an office and we have always had the ability to work from home. And one of my members of staff has always worked from home part-time. And then I took on a new member of staff, hired her before lockdown, and then wasn't able to actually see her. So she started from home. So it's been really interesting. In terms of working from home full-time, that's been really interesting, making sure that everything is cloud-based. We thought it was, but it does put your systems and processes to the test. And having to work with somebody new who you've only ever met once is really, really interesting as well. Has its challenges, but it's been exciting. In terms of my clients, we've not had those face-to-face meetings, and I love face-to-face. I feel like that's where, it's all about that non-verbal communication as well, isn't it? And clients tend to be quite anxious a lot of the time. So having to quell that anxiousness and to give them the information. So we've had lots of Zoom meetings. Definitely feeling a bit zoomed out. Lots of Zoom meetings. But saying that, it's enabled us to reach even an audience which is further than we ever would. So we've got some clients up north now. Had contact from a Northern Ireland client as well. So we would never have done that before, but it's been a good adaptation for us.
So can I take it a bit back?
So just give us a little...
Oh, sorry, Rachel.
Go on.
Let's take it, Chris. Go on. Introduce yourself and what you do, because some people unfortunately may not heard you when you came onto our show previously. So let's all our listeners hear about you and what you do.
Okay, so it's really hard to believe that the last time I was here was 2017.
I know, how crazy.
Literally feels like yesterday. So it's really, time does fly, especially when you're busy. So I started Orchard Employment Law in 2015 by myself from home. with the intention to supply employment law and HR advice to employers, based in Kent. So my view was mainly Kent, but reaching out to London and the surrounding areas. Fast forward a little bit. So we've been doing that. We still have our regular clients who can access us either ad hoc or on a retained basis. So they have that ongoing support. And then now I'm doing other things. So in addition to that, I now have staff. We now have an office. We're now servicing clients across the UK, can actually say that. And I'm also a speaker. So I realised probably around about 2017, which I think is where we met Rachel, but then I just started speaking then. And I started speaking about, my experience of starting a business, because I found that lots of people have the same experiences, or they don't know what they're going to face and the challenges. So my passion really was towards startups and giving them the advice they need from a generic point of view, as well as a legal standpoint, about networking, building a business, creating a brand, all of those things. And then also now I'm doing a lot more speaking about BAME and Black women in business, because I feel like that's something that needs to be spoken about and addressed. And so so I'm doing lots of speaking, lots of radio. So I was already doing radio when we met, so still a radio co-host, but we're doing reruns as well. And the business has just gone from strength to strength, really. So yeah.
Fantastic.
Wow. And that's only in 3 years, like
5 years. 5.
Okay. Oh, yeah. 5 years. 5 years. Yeah. And how is sorry, I know I'm just being nosy now, but how's the speaking kind of gigs coming along? Because that was something that, as you said, when I met you and you were given a speech, you were talking. Yeah. So how have you found that and growing that part of the business?
Yeah, so just organically, just by speaking more and more, really, and promoting yourself on LinkedIn. So showing people what you're doing. So people won't believe me, but I am naturally a reserved character. And sharing wasn't usually my thing. It is now. I share everything. So just sharing on LinkedIn what I'm doing, having little video clips. And then it came to a stage where somebody said, so how much would you charge? And I was like, I hadn't, let me come back to you. I hadn't thought about that one. So yeah, it's been fantastic. I've spoken in London, in Kent, Southampton, all over really, about various different topics for industry specific related organisation, accountancy, travel, tourism, various different things. So yeah, it's really, and lots of radio as well. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Excellent. All right, so Keith, I guess bringing it back to kind of where we are now, 2020 and coronavirus and COVID, have you found that you've been approached about particular issues or particular kind of like, has there been something become more in demand, or a service or things that people need to know about?
Yeah, absolutely. So before, let's go back sort of 2.5 months, nobody had ever heard the term furlough. And now it's almost like it's a common use language, right? So before then, nobody knew what furlough was. In the industry, we just call it layoff. We don't actually call it this furlough thing. So prior to the furlough being introduced, all the businesses were struggling. Most businesses were struggling, should I say. Some have thrived, but on the whole, most businesses were struggling. And this is even before lockdown. So the concern then was, I've got to make cuts. What do I do? So there was an influx of redundancies and redundancy conversations. So that was high in demand. And then the government introduced this coronavirus retention scheme, which is the furlough scheme. Cool. So then everybody was like, so what is that? How do I do that? Because they kind of rolled out this thing and said this will be available, but didn't tell people the how, and just said, well, it's still subject to UK employment law. So, if you're furloughing somebody, you can't just do that because the government says so. You've got to have a contractual right to do so. And if you haven't got that contractual right, then you need to create one via sort of some sort of negotiation. To be honest, I haven't seen any members of staff refuse furlough, but it was still something extra that you had to do. So we had that, and then we went quiet for a period of time. Now that we're looking at coming out of furlough, people are like, so what's next? Do I need to make cuts? Can I put people on less hours? Now people are trying to plan for the future about how they are going to rebuild their business, because the truth is, even when lockdown ends properly, the economy's got to recover, and we've got to build back consumer confidence, and that's going to take some time.
Yeah. So as you've spoken about kind of when lockdown ends and going back to a sense of normality, or you know how things were before, how are you advising a lot of your clients on how to do that, like safely, bearing in mind staff welfare, you know, health and safety legislation and law? Is there anything that kind of like the smaller businesses are perhaps finding difficult, or that you're kind of like hearing along the grapevine that actually smaller businesses are going to need a bit more support in this area and keeping their staff safe?
Yeah, I mean, so just from a social distancing point of view, for a lot of us, we have the space that we need. We don't have excess space, me included. So, you know, we've been looking at, well, how do we do social distancing? If I have 2 meter distance, can I have all of my team members back at the same time? What do we do about that? So that's been a big thing. And the advice is that, you know, try and be sensible. There are screens you can buy. There are things you can do to protect people. The main message really is about hand washing still, and good hygiene, making sure some people have put in like a walkway, so you walk specific ways to go around desks, removing desks from being facing, putting them more side by side. So those are the main messages, and lots of signage too. I've also suggested to quite a few clients is to have shifts. So if you don't need everybody in, say 9 till 5, have shifts, or rotate who's working from home, or put people on the rotation so that not everybody's in the space at the same time. So that's also another option in terms of a health and safety point of view. But one of the big things that people have been concerned about is where they don't want, you know, staff don't want to come back to work because they've got children. So they're like, you know, I can't come back to work because the schools aren't open yet. So, and everyone's like, well,
sorry,
what do I do then?
Noise in the background. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
live studio going on. Sorry. Yeah. So children going back to school.
Yeah. So that's been a big thing, because if you've got childcare issues, how can you go back to work? But at the same time, you need to go back to work, you know, to suit the business needs.
So as an organisation yourself giving advice, what have been the main things that have been asking you during this time? What have been their key concerns?
The key concerns, they have changed. As I said, the key concerns were about reducing the staff.
Yeah.
So that was redundancy. Then it was about doing furlough safely and correctly, what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do. And what we did is we did bulletins all the time. So if anyone was signed up to our newsletter, as soon as information came out, we gave them that information, because we're receiving the information the same time as everybody else. But the benefit that we have is that we can digest that information and simplify it, and make sure we can do it in a compliant way as well. And now, go.
Has there been areas of your business that has seen a higher demand than others because of what's going on and business trying to kind of make a safer space?
So we don't do health and safety as such, but we've definitely had more people inquiring about what if people don't want to come back to work because they fear for their health and safety, because that's another issue. You know, it's like, for instance, when the government said go to work but don't take public transport if you can help it.
Yeah.
So then we had clear message. So then we had all of these concerns about, well, you know, what if my staff member says they can't come to work because they've got to catch the train? What can I do? What can't I do? And the advice has been, you know, I think some of it's basic, some of it is having those transparent conversations, and some of it is actually, I need you to come in. What can I do to quell your concerns? What can I do to help?
And are there any kind of, I guess, policies, and as you said, you don't necessarily do health and safety, but are there any policies that employers should be looking at specifically at perhaps reviewing or amending in light of staff coming back? And also, how does this affect how does it affect businesses who perhaps have got freelancers? So they're not necessarily employees. Are they kind of covered by the same sorts of legislation and health and safety policies as well?
So health and safety applies to everybody. You know, once you've got people in your premises, you've got to look after both staff, service users, freelancers, contractors, anybody that comes into that space. You've got a duty to protect them, and a duty also to have the relevant insurance. In terms of other freelancers, they can vary. They can come under lots of different kind of banners. So some people are freelancers who are workers, so they've got some rights but not all rights, and some people are workers who are self-employed. When we were looking at the furlough system, anybody who was PAYE, so that included 0-hour contract workers and some freelancers, were covered for the furlough, but those who were self-employed were not covered. So if they'd never been on that payroll, they weren't covered. One of the other things about health and safety, which we should have done before, but if you haven't, it's not too late, is even when you've got people working from home, is to make sure that they're filling out, a DSE desktop, looking at how their computer's set up, because the chances are they haven't taken home the desk and the chair, and we've still got this duty to make sure that the screen's the right height, that they've got the right chair, because you don't want anything to come back on you. People having these latent problems as a result from working around the kitchen table, which is what I'm doing, working around the kitchen table. So, it's really simple. If you just type in DSE into Google, it will take you to the Health Safety Executive HSE website, and you can download a free form which you can ask your staff to fill out. But the important thing is, once they've filled it out, to keep it on file and to make any adjustments necessary. So you might need to have a box to put the screen on, for instance, or order them a chair or a specific keyboard.
Okay, so do you encourage all kind of our small businesses and organizations to kind of get their employees to undertake this assessment to make sure that they're safe in their home?
Definitely, more than encourage, I insist. Okay. You must do this. Cover yourself, and cover your staff. It's not just about you.
Well, it's just, exactly that. It's making sure that your staff members are protected and working in a safe way, but also yourself as a business. You want to make sure that you're working as safely as possible, because you're right, you do have a duty of care, because I didn't really think about, if you're working from home around the kitchen table, surely it's the employees' responsibility to make sure that they're working safely, but actually you're working from home. So
the employers, it still extends that duty extends to them, and the same things like having things pack tested, all the things you would do if somebody was in an office, you've still got to do when they're working from home. So if you haven't got a working from home policy, maybe now is the time to get one.
Jemma, do you mind?
Absolutely.
So we've got a question from Lorraine Natalie, and she says, how does all of this affect co-working spaces? So obviously a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs are using co-working spaces as their offices. So how does this affect them? So our office is a serviced office within a co-working space. So I'm really, really familiar with that. And the landlord of the co-working space should be doing a risk assessment to make sure they are compliant. And the risk assessment probably will reduce the amount of people they can have in the office at any time. And they should have guidelines. So, for instance, when you come into the co-working space before you come into our office, there are signs about make sure you wash your hands. There's sanitizer. There is antibacterial door handles. There is a specific structured walkway to make sure that you're not going to be bumping into people. So even as a co-worker, you need to be looking after yourself. And if you've got anybody else working with you, because you could have staff or freelancers or even visitors coming to the co-working space, you need to be making sure that you've done a risk assessment to see what the risks are. So when you do risk assessments, you might find that there are things that you can't avoid. That's fine. You just need to do the assessment, because that shows that you've tried to reduce any risk where possible.
Okay. Can I ask a slightly technical question?
Go on then.
Slightly technical. So, an employer, or should I say, an employee is working from home. The employer decides, actually, you don't need to come into the office anymore. You can work from home. You can work from a co-working space. Is it let's say they're working from a co-working space, is it still the employer's responsibility to go and check that space to make sure that it's safe, or is that, as you said, is that down to the landlord of the space to ensure that that they've done that?
So that would be joint. So as the employer, you've still got to make sure the space is safe, and that doesn't necessarily mean going and doing a spot check, but it does mean asking your staff to do the relevant things we've just discussed. But from a landlord's perspective, they won't be checking whether your chair's fine, whether the screen is the right height, but they've got a duty as a premises owner to make sure that they're not doing anything that's putting you at risk, such as having wires that you might trip over, or making sure their desks are socially distanced.
Wow, a lot to think about. I've got another question, sorry, about an employee. If you're self-isolating, can your employer still ask you to work from home, or are you considered off sick?
So it depends on why you're self-isolating. So remember, there's two types of self-isolating. One is you have the virus or you have symptoms, and one is you're living with somebody who has displayed symptoms or has the virus. So if you're just living with somebody, and therefore it's a bit like shielding, they can ask you to do the work. That's fine. If, however, you have the virus or symptoms, then you shouldn't be doing any work because you're off sick, unless you want to. But as an employee, I'd be thinking, well, I'm getting SSP here, which significantly lower than my wages, getting sick pay, statutory sick pay. So I think you've got to try and be reasonable. If you want people to work, pay them for the work. Yeah,
absolutely. So that leads to my next question. In terms of business people, what are the procedures that they should be putting in place if one of their employees says, I've got symptoms and I'm now ill? What are the kind of procedures they should be putting in place to protect the business, I guess?
Yeah, so if you know that they've been in contact, so say they've been in the workplace and they've been in contact with a group of people, then you need to tell that group of people that somebody has had the virus, if they have it, because they need to be aware, and they also should perhaps think about maybe self-isolating. In terms of now with that test, we can get tested. I would ask them to get tested because that's important, and ask them. This is the thing. So when ordinarily, let's say it wasn't COVID-19, let's say somebody was just sick with something, you don't have the right to see the medical notes. But we might want to see the test. So you don't necessarily have the right. You'd have to request for that employee to share or give you the ability to contact their GP to share information about that specific thing which they're off with. So what we're doing is we're encouraging people to say, would you share it with us? We're encouraging them to share it with us. But again, you might want to put in a policy now that says, actually, if it's related to this, we want you to have the test, and also we want you to share that information with us, because it's for the greater good. It's not about snooping or being nosy. It's literally just for the greater good.
And does the whole organisation need to know that someone has possible symptoms? Do other co-workers, for instance, if there was a meeting before, what things need to be in place for those other employees that may have been surrounded or could have been in touch with them?
So at the moment, there's no guidance for them to self-isolate or to shield. That might change, though, when we get this track and trace app, because from what we're hearing the government saying is, at the moment you get that message to say you've been in contact with somebody who's been with the virus, then you're going to need to self-isolate. So that then says that if somebody gets it at work and somebody else, and you've been in contact with them, then maybe you should be self-isolating. But the guidance at the moment isn't that guidance. It's just for them to be aware, and then if they start to display symptoms, to make sure that they don't come into work.
Wow. Okay. So kind of leaving the symptoms aside for a moment, as we've said, we're trying, the lockdown is coming to an end. It's all being eased and we're being encouraged to go back to work. However, for those who are still on furlough, are you still accruing kind of like annual leave, kind of like your maternity pay or maternity rights? Is pension, is that all still kind of for you whilst you're on furlough, or is it like literally it's as if you no longer work for the organisation but you're just getting paid 80% of your salary?
Yeah, so with furlough, all of your employment rights remain intact. Your continuity of service remains intact. You continue to accrue holiday. You are still employed by the company. The only difference is you cannot work, and you may be receiving a reduction in salary. So, some staff are not receiving a reduction because their employer might have topped up the other 20%. But that's the only thing that changes is the salary. Other than that, all of your employment rights, pension, everything remains the same. One thing about that, though, is an employer can insist that you take holiday whilst you're on furlough, because they may have a concern about if you're on furlough for a really long period of time, then they've got all of their staff building this holiday. And then when you come back, they've got to, you've got the right to take it. So they can say to you, I want you to take this week as holiday. What they need to do is give you adequate notice. And the adequate notice is twice as long as the holiday they want you to take. So simply put, if you want them to have 1 day off, you need to tell them 2 days, give them 2 days notice. If you want them to have 1 week off, they need two weeks notice of that. And what I would do with that holiday as well, it should be paid at 100%. So the employer would need to top up that extra 20% for that time. But, from a business perspective, it may seem actually that's quite a good way to use the annual leave and still be getting some income. You mentioned maternity, so I just want to touch on that quickly. You can't be on maternity and on furlough at the same time. So, if you're on maternity leave, you're on maternity leave, and that continues to work in the same way. You could come off maternity leave and go on furlough. But you can't be on both.
I guess leading on from that then, can you be made redundant, or can you be served notice, or can the redundancy kind of like consultation period start whilst you're on furlough? Because I'm thinking a lot of people that, as you spoke about earlier, the whole thing about the economy and trying to build that up again. And, imagine if you haven't been in the office, no one's been in the office, so you haven't really had any face-to-face contact, you're not even sure what's going on. Can your employer kind of turn around and say, well, actually, we think we need to put you on notice? How does that work?
Yeah, they can, and they are, because they've got no choice. There are some businesses that won't be here in 3 to 6 months' time, and some of them will be here at a fraction of the size that they were. So they are able to have those conversations with you. So they can do Zoom meetings, they can do telephone consultation. There's no rules about it having to be face to face, but I would say if you can do video, it's just kind of try and treat people how you'd want to be treated, and have that consultation period. You can also keep people on their notice period whilst they're on furlough. So you need to top up the extra 20%, but they can still be on furlough, so you can claim that 80% from the government, and then you top up that 20% for however many weeks. So it's kind of similar to garden leave.
Yeah. Gosh, it's a rabbit hole.
It is. Can you just remind people, if in case they don't know, how they can actually access that 80% grant to pay staff? And did I hear correctly that there's some changes in terms of you weren't able to work, but now you can actually find, is it part-time or work on off?
Flexible furlough. So firstly, you need to do it today, because if you don't do it today, you won't be able to access it. Today is the deadline. And I don't even know whether that deadline had a time on it. So, if you're sitting here thinking, I haven't done this yet, now is the time. Right. Because anybody who's put on the scheme after today won't be able to be on it. I haven't personally furloughed anybody, but all of my clients have said it's been quite an easy process. If you go onto the .gov portal, the .gov portal, and type in furlough, it will take you to the place where you put in all of the details about your staff member. So it's from what I understand, it's fairly easy to do, but it needs to be done today if it hasn't been done already. The other question you asked me was
flexible.
Changes now. Yeah, so that's changing. So previously, when you were on furlough, you absolutely couldn't do any work at all, and HMRC are going to be doing investigations into fraudulent furlough. So where employers are going, I want you to work, but I also want to say you're on furlough so I can claim back that 80%. They are coming for you. Is what I'm going to say. You know, they won't get to everybody, but they have made it quite clear they're not playing about with that. So you couldn't have done that. Yeah. But from next month, you can do flexible furlough, which means that you can have staff come back to work part-time. And the benefit of that is, as I said, the economy isn't going to bounce back overnight, but you still need some workers to work in order to build that economy. So what you might do is you'll say, well, you know, you normally work 4 days a week, but I want you to come back 2 days a week, and the other 2 days you don't work. And then what you do is you can still claim some monies from the government for the days they're not working, and you pay for the days they are working. And that enables you to build back the business, and also, you know, gently bring people back to work. You know, some people have been having snoozes in the middle of the day. So some people need to get over the whole siesta thing, you know, and just reintegrate, you know, joke aside, they need to get back to being social again and having to get dressed or get back into their, you know, work trousers or whatever it is. Some of us need some time. Yeah. So yeah, you can do that. The other changes as well are employers are going to have to contribute soon. So, you know, from August onwards, it's going to be a sliding scale where employers are having to contribute towards that furlough scheme. So that's why the conversations now are about redundancy, because they're looking and going, actually, I can't afford this. Yeah.
A lot going on. Right, time is up. Rachel, do you have a last question?
No, well, I do have a last question, and it's probably on behalf of people watching to say, I need to get in touch with Jemma because I need some information about this, and this. So how can they get in touch with you, Jemma?
Yeah, so if you visit the website, which is www.orchardemploymentlaw.co.uk, you can just fill in the contact us form, and they'll get back to you sort of as soon as possible.
Thank you. That went really quickly, and I'm sure there's lots more we can be discussing. But thank you so much, Jemma.
I feel like I've learned a lot. Good. Like I feel like I can give a government briefing now.
Can you?
I can give a government briefing. Thank you.
Good.
Bless you, Jemma. Thank you so much. Rachel, as always, thank you. And everybody, thanks for watching.
No worries. Sorry about a bit of background noise, but
hey ho.
Thank you, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week, guys.
Bye.
Bye.